Everyone thinks that women in their 40s should just accept a dead marriage and resign themselves to being only mothers and wives forever. The story I'm about to tell will shock you, revolt you, and maybe make you question your own moral limits. I'm Rebecca Williams, a nutritionist, mother of 3 from suburban California, and I'm going to tell you about the most intense romance of my life, but also how desperation transformed me. If you're in a relationship without passion, this story will make you rethink everything. Have you ever stopped to think about what it's like to wake up every day next to someone and still feel completely alone? That's exactly what I was living in Riverside, California. Rebecca Williams, 42 years old, mother of 3 incredible kids, married for 17 long years to James Nakamura. From the outside, we were the perfect suburban American family. A beautiful house in Oak Valley, 2 cars in the garage, the boys on the school baseball team. But inside was like living in a theater play, where I had forgotten my role a long time ago. James had always been a brilliant businessman, son of Japanese immigrants who built an empire of clothing stores spread throughout the state. When we got married, I was only 25 and he was 39. He had already gone through the grief of losing his first wife to cancer, and I was naive enough to believe I could heal his wounds with love. What irony, right? Time showed that some wounds never heal completely. They just create calluses that make a person numb to the touch of whoever is by their side. Our children were my anchor to reality. Kevin, 15, was already showing signs that he knew something was wrong between his parents. Connor, 13, still lived in his world of video games and didn't notice much. And my little Lily, only 9 years old, still looked at me as if I were the strongest woman in the world. How could I destroy that illusion? How could I admit that the strong woman she saw was falling apart inside? Day after day, forced smile after forced smile. The routine had become our prison. James left at 6:30 a.m. for the office, came back at 9 p.m., had dinner watching Bloomberg News, and went up to his room. Yes, his room. We had been sleeping in separate rooms for 3 years, officially because of his snoring, but the truth was that neither of us could stand the intimacy of sharing a bed anymore. It was like we were 2 strangers living in the same house for convenience. 2 strangers raising 3 children together. The attempts to save our marriage were many and all frustrated. Couples therapy. He went in body, but with his mind clearly on his business. Romantic trips. He brought his laptop and took calls during dinner. We moved houses thinking a new environment would bring renewal. We even moved cities. But you can't run from problems that are inside you. Inside the dynamic you 2 created over the years. The problem wasn't the place. The problem was us. The suspicion of betrayal had crossed my mind several times. But honestly, James never gave clear signs of that. There was no different perfume, strange phone calls, or suspicious behavior. Actually, it was almost worse than that. It was like he was cheating on our family with his own work, his own ambitions. He had married his business long before he married me. And me? I was just the decorative wife who kept the house running and the kids happy. What hurt me most was the indifference. You know when you show something important to someone and the person doesn't even look up? That's how James reacted to everything in my life. My achievements, my frustrations, my dreams. Everything was received with a distracted, or a nod that meant, I'm pretending I'm paying attention, but I'm actually thinking about the quarterly sales report. It's impressive how indifference can be crueler than anger. I had reached the point where I expected nothing from him anymore. No loving good morning. No question about how my day was. No good night kiss. We were housemates at most. And maybe it was better that way, because at least I had stopped disappointing myself daily. When you expect nothing, you can't get frustrated, right? Wrong, because deep down, every human being needs to feel seen, valued, desired. and I was starving emotionally in material abundance. The idea of divorce was no longer a question of if, but when and how. The only thing holding us together was logistics. How to divide custody of the children, how to explain to them, how to divide assets without it becoming a war. But the most ironic thing about all this was that I, at 42 years old, after 17 years with the same man, was starting to wonder if I still had the right to be happy, if I still had the right to be desired, if there was still time to discover who I really was when I wasn't playing the role of perfect wife. You know what the moment was that changed everything in my life? It was when I looked in the mirror and realized that at 42 years old, I no longer knew who Rebecca Williams was. I was James's wife, Kevin's, Connor's and Lily's mother, the nutritionist from Riverside Hospitals. But who was I? For years I had worked with temporary contracts at different hospitals in the region. I was a competent, respected professional, but always in the comfort zone, always waiting for someone to offer me the next contract, the next project. But deep down, I knew I had potential for much more. I just didn't have the courage to bet on myself. The midlife crisis hit like a runaway train. I woke up one Tuesday morning, looked out the kitchen window while making coffee, and asked myself, is this it? Is this how I'm going to live the rest of my life? My children were growing up. They would soon leave home for college. James was increasingly distant. And me? I was slowly disappearing, like a photo that fades over time. It was at that moment that a phrase I read in a magazine hit me hard. Life is not a dress rehearsal. It's the only performance you're going to have. And I was wasting my only chance to shine. Digital marketing appeared in my life by chance, as the best opportunities always do. I was browsing YouTube, looking for healthy recipes to vary the kids' menu, when I came across a video of a woman my age talking about how she had created an online business selling fit cooking courses. She wasn't prettier than me, wasn't smarter, didn't have more resources, but she had something I had lost a long time ago. Courage to dream big. I spent the entire night watching videos about digital entrepreneurship, and for the first time in years, I felt that butterfly feeling in my stomach. You know that feeling, when you discover something that can change your life forever. Of course, when I mentioned the idea to the family, the reaction was, let's say, less than enthusiastic. James laughed in my face at the dinner table. Rebecca, you're already 42 years old. These internet things are for young people, for people who don't have real responsibilities. Kevin, my oldest son, was more direct. Mom, these internet guys are all scammers. You're going to lose money. Even my dad, when I called to tell him, sighed and said, Daughter, you already have a stable profession. Why risk it? But you know what hurt me most? It was realizing that the people who should support me most were the first to throw water on my fire. But something inside me had awakened and wouldn't go back to sleep. I started studying digital marketing like a possessed person. I woke up at 5 a.m. before everyone to watch online classes. I read articles during lunch at the hospital. I listened to entrepreneurship podcasts in traffic. It was like I had found a lost passion from adolescence. I decided to start selling nutritional consulting online, taking advantage of my training and experience. Nothing very elaborate at first, just an Instagram profile and some posts about healthy eating. But with each like, each comment, each question in direct messages, I felt I was building something mine, finally something that was 100% mine. The first 2 months were an emotional roller coaster. Days when I sold 2 consultations and felt on top of the world. Days when I sold nothing and questioned whether I wasn't being ridiculous. James continued with his ironies. How was the digital empire today? Entrepreneur. But I persisted because I had an inner voice telling me this was bigger than money. It was about recovering my identity, my self-esteem, my ability to dream. It was about proving to myself that I could still surprise the world. and mainly, surprise myself. And then it happened. At the end of the second month, my online revenue equaled my hospital salary. It wasn't those absurd amounts that internet gurus promise in their courses, but it was enough to make me realize this wasn't luck. It was the result of dedication, strategy, and a lot of work. I printed the bank statement and left it on the kitchen table for James to see. When he came home from work, he looked at the numbers, was silent for a few seconds, and simply said, "Interesting. No congratulations. No questioning about how I managed it. No demonstration of pride. Just interesting." At that moment, I understood that my success bothered him more than he was willing to admit. But I wasn't going to let his coldness discourage me. On the contrary, that reaction gave me even more fuel. If in 2 months I had achieved these results, working only a few hours a day, what could I achieve in a year, dedicating myself completely? I started making bigger plans. Create a complete online course on functional nutrition. Develop a nutritional tracking app. Maybe even write a book. The possibilities were infinite. And for the first time in decades, I felt truly alive. I woke up with purpose, slept with expectation. It was like I had been professionally reborn. As my business grew, something interesting started happening to me. I was more confident, more decisive, more attractive. It might sound strange, but when you're passionate about what you do, it reflects in everything, in your posture, in your smile, in the energy you transmit. I started receiving compliments from strangers, being noticed differently, and it was precisely in this phase of personal and professional rebirth that something completely unexpected was about to enter my life. Something that would change not only my perspective on business, but on love, passion, and all the possibilities I had given up as lost. Sometimes destiny works in very peculiar ways, right? And that's exactly what happened on an ordinary Thursday morning. Kevin, my oldest son, came home from school, all excited, talking about wanting to get a part-time job. "Mom, I'm going to be 16 in 2 months, and I think it's important to work to have my own money. I want to learn to be responsible with money." My heart filled with pride, hearing that. After so many years seeing James being a workaholic, I was afraid my children would develop an unhealthy relationship with work. But Kevin wanted to work for the right values, to grow as a person. I immediately promised I would help him find something close to home. That's how I ended up entering LinkedIn that afternoon. I hadn't accessed my professional account for years. Actually, I created the profile about 5 years ago, just because everyone said it was important to have one, but I never paid much attention to it. When I entered to look for job opportunities for Kevin, I was shocked. My profile was completely outdated. It only showed my first 2 experiences as a nutritionist in San Bernardino hospitals, a city where I didn't even live anymore. There was nothing about my current work, nothing about my digital business that was thriving. It was like the last years of my professional life didn't exist. I decided to update everything before starting the search for Kevin. I added my current experience, put a new photo where I was radiant, one of those I took when I received my first 5-figure payment in the online business, and wrote a professional summary that really represented who I was now. No longer the shy nutritionist who accepted any temporary contract, but a confident digital entrepreneur who was building something significant. It was liberating to rewrite my own professional story. It was like I was officially introducing the new Rebecca Williams to the world. After updating my profile, I spent 2 hours looking for opportunities for Kevin in the Riverside region. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything that made sense for an intelligent and responsible teenager like him. Most of the vacancies were for heavy work or at hours that would compromise his studies. I closed the laptop somewhat frustrated and promised I would continue looking in the next few days. Kevin understood and said there was no hurry, that the important thing was to find something that would add value to his education. What a mature boy I was raising, right? 3 days later, I started receiving an avalanche of notifications in my email, LinkedIn connection requests, coming from everywhere. At first, I thought it was spam, but when I entered the platform, I realized they were real people wanting to connect with me. Nutritionists who had studied at the same university, professionals who worked at the same hospitals as me, even some people from the digital marketing field who must have found me through the keywords in my new profile. It was incredible how a simple update had put me on so many people's radar. I felt seen, remembered, recognized in a way that hadn't happened for years. The excitement of being professionally rediscovered motivated me to explore the platform more. I started browsing through the profiles of people who had sent me invites, reading interesting articles, better understanding how that professional social network worked. It was a completely new world for me. People sharing achievements, offering opportunities, building relationships that could change their careers. Why had I neglected this for so long? It was like discovering an entire city that existed next to your house, and you had never noticed. During my daily explorations on LinkedIn, which had already become a pleasant addiction, I always kept the focus on helping Kevin. I researched companies in the region, analyzed recruiter profiles, tried to understand what kind of opportunities existed for young people. It was during one of these searches that something caught my attention in a way I couldn't explain. In the list of people you may know appeared the profile of a man who made my heart skip a beat. He was a doctor, appeared to be in his 30s, dark-haired, with a smile that seemed to cross the computer screen and touch directly into my soul. The most intriguing thing was that LinkedIn indicated he had recently started working at Riverside Community Hospital, one of the places where I had already provided services as a nutritionist. It was a legitimate connection. It made sense for us to know each other professionally, but there was something in that smile, in those eyes that showed kindness and intelligence, that moved me in a way I hadn't felt in years, decades. I clicked on his profile and spent several minutes reading every word, analyzing every photo, trying to discover who Dr. Nathan Rodriguez was. Cardiologist, graduated from Stanford University, specialization at Harvard, volunteer in humanitarian organizations, an impressive resume, and a face I couldn't forget. For 3 consecutive days, I returned to his profile. I invented excuses for myself. I'll see if I find more connections from the hospital. Maybe he knows opportunities for Kevin. But the truth was, I was fascinated, not just by his appearance, but by all the energy I could feel through a simple photo. It was like there was an inexplicable connection between us, something that transcended the virtual world. Until one Friday afternoon, after another cold argument with James about something irrelevant, I took courage and decided to send the connection request. My finger trembled over the connect button, and I knew I was about to open a door to something that would change my life forever. Have you ever felt that sweet anxiety when you send a message to someone special and keep checking your phone every 5 minutes? That's exactly what happened to me after sending the connection request to Nathan. I spent the entire weekend inventing excuses to open LinkedIn. I'll just check if more invites arrived. I lied to myself, while actually desperate to see if he had accepted. James noticed I was strange, happier, more animated, and even commented, "You're different, Rebecca. Did something happen at work?" If he knew the difference was a man I didn't even know personally. Monday came, and nothing. Tuesday, nothing either. On Wednesday, I started questioning if I had been too hasty. Maybe he found it strange to receive an invite from someone he didn't know personally. Maybe he was married and avoided connections with women. Maybe I had imagined all that energy I felt through his photo. I started feeling ridiculous. A 42-year-old woman, fantasizing about a stranger on the internet like a teenager. But deep down, something told me that connection was real, that there was something special waiting to happen. It was a feminine intuition I hadn't felt in decades. I was visiting my dad on Thursday afternoon when it happened. Dad was recovering from gallbladder surgery, and I always made sure to see him at least 3 times a week. At 68 years old, he was my safe harbor, the person who always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I was telling him about the growth of my online business when I heard the LinkedIn notifications sound on my phone. My heart raced. I was sure it was him. "Dad, can I check a message quickly? It might be work." I lied shamelessly, because I knew that if it was Nathan, work would be the last thing on my mind. It was him. Nathan had accepted the connection and sent a message. "Hello, Rebecca. Welcome to my network. I saw you worked at Riverside Community. What a coincidence. I hope we can exchange experiences about the health field." A simple professional message, but that made me feel like I had won the lottery. I responded almost instantly, without even thinking about the words. "Hi, Nathan. What a pleasure to connect with you. I really worked at Riverside a few years ago. How has your experience there been?" Send. And then I realized he was online at that exact moment. The dots appeared indicating he was typing. My God, a conversation was about to begin. What followed was magical. The conversation flowed so naturally, it seemed like we had known each other for years. He told me he had actually been relocated to a hospital in Denver a week ago, but kept the profile outdated because it was still the same hospital group. We talked about the challenges in healthcare, about how difficult it was to maintain humanization in patient care in large hospitals. And then he mentioned something that surprised me. He was interested in digital marketing. As a doctor, I see that I need to diversify my income sources. The shifts are exhausting and not sustainable forever. I'm curious about this digital world, but I've never talked to someone who really lives from it. It was my chance to shine. I started telling about my entrepreneurial journey, the challenges, the achievements, the learnings. Nathan was genuinely interested, asking intelligent questions, commenting on aspects I had never considered. "Rebecca, you achieved something incredible, building a successful digital business at 42, being a mother of 3, with traditional training. That's inspiring." How long had I not heard words like these? How long had someone not shown genuine admiration for what I was building? James had never told me anything like that, not even close. The hours flew by. When I realized it, I had spent 2 hours talking to Nathan, while my dad dozed in the armchair. I had to say goodbye, so as not to raise suspicions, but we agreed to continue the conversation the next day. "It was an immense pleasure talking to you, Rebecca. You have contagious energy. I can hardly wait for our next conversation." I was literally radiant when I left my dad's house. In the car, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. A woman with bright eyes, with a genuine smile, with that energy of someone who had just discovered something wonderful. That night, at home, I could barely concentrate on anything else. James was watching TV in the living room, and I pretended to be working on the laptop. But actually, I was rereading our conversations several times, analyzing every word, every emoji, every exclamation point. It was like deciphering a secret code from someone who could become very special in my life. I realized Nathan had a way of writing that transmitted human warmth, intelligence, and sensitivity. It was exactly the opposite of the cold and functional conversations I had with James for years. And one question wouldn't leave my head. Was he feeling the same connection I was? The next morning, I woke up with a different energy. I had something to look forward to during the day. Someone who would probably think of me as I was thinking of him. I prepared breakfast for the kids, humming softly, something I hadn't done in months. Lily noticed. "Mom, you're happy today." And I really was. For the first time in years, I had a sweet secret, a sweet expectation, a reason to smile. that had nothing to do with professional achievements or children's accomplishments. It had to do with me, with the woman I was rediscovering through the eyes of a man I barely knew, but who was already moving my heart in a way I had forgotten was possible. You know when you find someone who simply gets you in a way you didn't even know was possible? That's exactly what happened with Nathan and me in the following weeks. Our conversations on LinkedIn became daily, then several times a day, then constant. We talked about everything: medicine, nutrition, entrepreneurship, but also about life, dreams, frustrations. Nathan had a way of seeing the world that was both pragmatic and sensitive. He understood the pressure of working in healthcare, but also had this thirst for something more, for financial freedom, for greater impact on people's lives. It was like talking to a male version of myself, only more experienced in some areas and more innocent in others. What caught my attention most was how he valued my opinion. When I explained digital marketing strategies, he not only listened, but took notes, implemented suggestions, came back to tell me the results. "Rebecca, I tested that idea you gave about creating educational content on Instagram. In 3 days, I got 200 new followers. It was incredible how someone so successful in medicine could be so humble to learn something completely new." James, on the other hand, always implied that my digital business was women's stuff compared to his serious business. The difference in attitude was striking, and I was beginning to realize how much I had settled for crumbs of recognition. The conversation started getting more personal over time. Nathan told me about the pressure of being a doctor in a Latino immigrant family, where he was seen as the successful one, how everyone expected him to be perfect, always available, always sacrificing his personal life for his career. Sometimes I feel like I don't have the right to complain about anything, you know. Everyone thinks that because I'm a doctor, I should always be fulfilled and happy. But have you ever felt like you're living the life others expect of you, not the one you really want? That question hit me like a punch in the stomach. It was exactly how I had been feeling for years, but I had never been able to put it into such precise words. I opened up to him in a way I had never opened up to anyone. I told him about the feeling of losing my identity in marriage, about how I felt invisible in my own house. "Nathan, sometimes I wake up and don't know who I am anymore. I'm just James's wife, the kid's mother, the hospital's nutritionist. But who is Rebecca? What does she want from life? What makes her happy?" He responded with a sensitivity that made me cry right there in front of the computer. "Rebecca, you're one of the most authentic people I've ever met. Your passion for what you do, your dedication to your children, your courage to start over at 42, that's who you are. And it's beautiful to see." Our conversations extended into the early hours when he wasn't on call. I invented excuses to stay awake. "I'll just finish some work," I told James, who had been sleeping in his room for hours. Actually, I was living an emotional intensity I had forgotten existed. Nathan and I talked about everything: our childhoods, our fears, our most secret dreams. He wanted to travel the world offering voluntary medical care. I dreamed of creating a digital empire that could give financial freedom to other women. "What if we did this together someday?" he suggested in one of these nighttime conversations. "Imagine what impact we could cause combining medicine and nutrition in a global project." The chemistry between us was becoming impossible to ignore. It wasn't just physical attraction, although it definitely existed. It was a connection of souls I didn't know I was looking for until I found it. Nathan had a way of making me laugh that was contagious. He told funny stories from the shifts, imitated difficult colleagues, made intelligent jokes that showed how cultured and humorous he was. But he also knew how to be deep when the conversation called for it. "Rebecca, have you ever stopped to think that maybe we found each other at the right time? when we're both questioning our paths and needing someone who really understands us. I thought about this every day actually. The boundaries between professional and personal were naturally dissolving. We started sharing photos of our daily lives. He sent me selfies from the hospital, always handsome, always with that smile that melted my heart. I sent photos of my work moments, business achievements, even the dishes I cooked. It was like we were living our lives together, even separated by thousands of miles. I wish I were there to taste that lasagna you made, he wrote one afternoon. I bet you cook with the same care you put into everything in your life. Comments like that made me float for the rest of the day. There came a point where I looked forward to his messages more than anything else in my routine. I woke up, and the first thing I did was check if there was a message from him. During the day, I was anxious to tell him about small victories or frustrations. At night, I could only sleep after our good night conversation. James started commenting that I was always on my phone. This digital business is becoming an obsession, Rebecca. If he knew my obsession wasn't the business, but a cardiologist from Denver, who was completely changing my perspective on what it means to feel truly understood and desired by someone. The most intense thing was that even talking every day, the desire to meet him personally only grew. Nathan, I wrote in one of these deep conversations, have you ever wanted to meet someone so intensely that it physically hurts? He responded almost instantly, I'm feeling that now, Rebecca. What if I told you I have a long break next month and was thinking about taking a trip, maybe to California? My heart stopped. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for and fearing at the same time. The possibility of transforming our virtual connection into something real was finally coming, and I knew my life would never be the same after that. Guys, have you ever felt that mixture of panic and euphoria when something you've dreamed about for weeks is finally going to happen? That's exactly how I felt when Nathan confirmed he was coming to California. Rebecca, I managed to get 3 days off. How about we meet in San Francisco? It's neutral territory for both of us, and I've always wanted to see the city. San Francisco was a 2-hour drive from Riverside, perfect for maintaining discretion. I invented a story for James about a nutrition conference that had come up last minute. It could be a good networking opportunity for your business, he said, without even looking up from the newspaper. If he knew the only networking I would do was with my own heart. The week leading up to the meeting was delicious torture. Nathan and I planned every detail. He would stay at the Four Seasons. I would arrive Saturday morning and stay until Monday afternoon. What if we don't have the same chemistry in person? I asked in one of our most tense conversations. Rebecca, he replied, if in 3 months of daily conversation, I haven't gotten tired of your company, I seriously doubt 3 days will be enough for that. Besides, we're adults. If by some chance the magic doesn't happen, at least we'll have lived an incredible adventure. That mature and sensible response calmed me down, but also increased my expectation in an almost unbearable way. I arrived in San Francisco on a sunny Saturday morning, with my heart beating so hard, I was sure everyone in the hotel could hear it. Nathan said he would wait for me in the lobby at 10 a.m. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. Basic feminine strategy, right? But when I saw him, my God, the photos didn't do him justice. He was even more handsome in person, wearing a blue shirt that highlighted his eyes, dark jeans, that smile I already knew so well. But that was now there, real, directed only at me. When our eyes met for the first time, I felt an electric shock run through my entire body. It was pure, undeniable, overwhelming chemistry. Rebecca, he approached with a smile that seemed to light up the entire lobby. Nathan, I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice. When he hugged me, it was like all the pieces of a puzzle finally fit together. He smelled of a discreet, masculine perfume, mixed with something that was purely him. The hug lasted a few seconds longer than would be socially appropriate, and when we separated, his eyes were shining in a way that confirmed, yes, the magic was real. "You're even more beautiful in person," he whispered, and I felt my legs go weak. How long had a man not made me feel this way? How long had I not felt truly desired? The first day was magical in a way that only happens in movies. We walked through Fisherman's Wharf, had lunch at a restaurant overlooking the bay, visited Lombard Street, but what struck me most was how the conversation flowed naturally, as if we were childhood friends who had reunited. Nathan was even more charismatic in person, had a way of paying attention to me that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. "Did you know you gesture a lot when you talk about your passions?" he observed, while I explained a marketing strategy. "It's beautiful to see. You become radiant." Comments like that left me melted and increasingly in love. The romantic tension grew throughout the day in an almost palpable way. Small, accidental touches, looks that lasted a few seconds longer, smiles with double meaning. When we arrived at the hotel at the end of the afternoon, we stayed a few minutes in the lobby, just talking, but we both knew there was a decision to be made. "Rebecca," Nathan said, taking my hand, "I don't want to pressure you in any way. We can have dinner, talk, and you can go to your room whenever you want. But if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to have dinner with me in my room." I ordered room service, brought a bottle of wine. His eyes said much more than words, and my entire body responded with a yes before my mind even fully processed the proposal. Dinner in the room was the most romantic thing I had ever experienced. Nathan had prepared everything with touching care: candles, soft music, the incredible view of San Francisco at night through the window. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, laughing, toasting, looking at each other with an intimacy that already seemed years old. And when it finally happened, when we finally kissed and gave ourselves to each other, it was an explosion of sensations I didn't even know I was still capable of feeling. Nathan was tender, passionate, attentive to my every reaction. He made me feel like a goddess, like a woman truly desired and loved. It was like being sexually reborn at 42. Sunday morning, we woke up in each other's arms, and for the first time in years, I felt complete. Nathan prepared breakfast while I stayed in bed, admiring that incredible man who had entered my life so unexpectedly. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, bringing a tray with coffee, fruits, and croissants. "Did you sleep well?" I slept like I hadn't slept in years. Nestled in the arms of someone who really wanted me there. "Nathan," I whispered, pulling him for another kiss. "Thank you for reminding me what it's like to be a woman." He smiled and replied, "Thank you for reminding me what it's like to be really in love." In love, the word echoed in my heart like perfect music, but perfect happiness, as you'll discover, sometimes has an expiration date. On Sunday afternoon, while we were planning what our last night together would be like, Nathan's phone rang. It was a call he simply couldn't ignore. "Sorry, love. It's from the hospital. It might be an emergency." Love. He had called me love. While he answered the phone in the bathroom, I stayed in bed still intoxicated with happiness, not imagining that call would change everything, that in a matter of minutes I would discover that our perfect love story was about to face the first of many obstacles that would test whether what we felt for each other was strong enough to survive the cruel reality of life. You know those moments in life when you feel the universe is conspiring against your happiness. That's exactly what happened that Sunday afternoon at the Four Seasons. I was lying in bed, still feeling Nathan's perfume on my skin, admiring the view of San Francisco, and thinking how surprising life can be. 2 weeks ago, I was just a frustrated woman in Riverside, and now I was living the most intense romance of my life. Nathan was in the bathroom taking that call from the hospital, and I could only hear murmurs through the door. At first it seemed routine, one more of the thousands of calls doctors receive, But as the minutes passed, the tone of his voice changed. It became more serious, more formal. My heart started racing without me understanding exactly why. I understand. Yes, it's an excellent opportunity. I need to think. Can I give an answer by Wednesday? Those were the words I could clearly distinguish. Nathan spoke softly, but there was something in the intonation that put me on alert. It was the tone of someone receiving an important proposal, one of those calls that change the course of things. I tried to stay calm, didn't want to seem too curious, but an inner voice screamed that this had everything to do with me, with us, with the future I had started imagining in the last 24 hours. When I finally heard the sound of the flush and realized he was ending the call, my stomach contracted with anxiety. Nathan came out of the bathroom with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was something between relief and worry. "Everything okay, love?" I asked, trying to sound casual while dying of curiosity inside. He sat on the edge of the bed, ran his hand through his hair, a tic I had already noticed he did when he was thoughtful, and looked at me with those eyes I already knew so well, but that now seemed to carry the weight of a difficult decision. "Rebecca, that was from the hospital network's HR. They're offering me a transfer I've been asking for months." My heart plummeted. Transfer. The word echoed in my mind like a death sentence for our newborn love. "Transfer to where?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good for us. "To Miami. It's my hometown, where my whole family lives. My parents are aging. My wife has always wanted to go back there." Wife. The word hit me like a punch in the stomach, even though I already knew he was married. During these 3 months of conversations and these 2 magical days, I had managed to relegate that reality to a dark corner of my mind. But now it was there, raw and painful, reminding me that our story had complications that couldn't be ignored. It's a significant promotion, better salary, better hospital. It's everything I've always wanted professionally. The rest of that afternoon was an emotional roller coaster. Nathan tried to explain the situation. I tried to understand, but deep down, we both knew what that meant. Miami was on the other side of the country. He would return to his real life, to his wife, to his family responsibilities. And me? I would return to Riverside, to my unhappy married life, carrying the memory of what could have been if the timing had been different. "Nathan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you don't need to explain yourself. I always knew you had a life, commitments. This here," I gestured between the two of us, "was a beautiful parenthesis, but maybe that's all it is." But he didn't accept my attempt to minimize what we were living. "Rebecca, don't try to diminish this. What happened between us these months, these days, it was real. It was the realest thing I've felt in years. You awakened feelings in me that I thought I was no longer capable of having." Tears started streaming down my face, without me being able to control them. "So what do we do? How do we stay?" I asked, knowing there was no easy answer. Nathan approached, held my face in his hands, and said, "I don't know, love. I just know I don't want to lose you. I need to think about how we can make this work." Our last night in San Francisco was bittersweet. We made love with desperate intensity, as if we could keep those moments forever in memory. We talked until dawn about possibilities. What if I moved? What if he refused the transfer? What if we tried to maintain a long-distance relationship? All options seemed impossible for different reasons. I had 3 children in Riverside. He had family responsibilities in Miami. It was like being in love with someone from another planet. "Promise me one thing," Nathan whispered in my ear as I lay on his chest. "Promise we won't let this die without trying. What we have is too special to simply give up." Monday morning, the goodbye was devastating. Nathan took me to the car, and we stood in silence for a few minutes, just hugging, trying to keep that feeling forever. "This isn't goodbye," he said, kissing my forehead. "It's a see you later. We'll find a way, Rebecca. I promise." I drove the 2 hours back to Riverside, crying half the way, with a broken heart and full of hope at the same time. When I got home, James didn't even ask how the conference had been. The kids were at school. The house was silent, cold, in complete contrast to the warmth and passion I had left in San Francisco. That night, lying in my lonely bed, I knew my life had changed forever. Not because I had cheated on my marriage, that was just a consequence, but because I had rediscovered the passionate, desired, and alive woman that existed within me. Nathan had shown me that I could still feel butterflies in my stomach, that I could still tremble with desire, that I could still dream of true love. The question that wouldn't be silenced was, would we be able to transform those 3 magical days into something lasting, or would it just be a beautiful memory of how my life could have been if circumstances were different? The answer would come in the following weeks, and I already suspected it would be much more complicated than either of us imagined. The 2 weeks following our encounter in San Francisco were the most intense of my life. Nathan and I talked every day, sometimes for hours, trying to figure out how to make that impossible love work in real life. It was like trying to solve a math problem without a solution. No matter how much we turned it from one side to another, we always ran into the same impossible variable. He had to make the decision about Miami by the following Wednesday, and the weight of that choice was destroying both of us. Rebecca, if I refuse this promotion, I might not have another opportunity like this anytime soon. But if I accept, the sentence was always left hanging because we both knew how it ended. If he accepted, our story would end before it even really began. What tortured me most was Nathan's brutal honesty about his family situation. My wife Carmen has been waiting for this transfer for 2 years. Her parents live in Miami. She never fully adapted to Colorado. And my parents, Rebecca, they're aging. My father had some recent heart problems. As a doctor, I know they might not have much time. They raised me alone, sacrificed everything to give me an education. How can I choose my happiness over responsibility to them? It was impossible to argue against that. Nathan was a man of character, of responsibilities. Exactly the qualities that made me fall in love with him. But those same qualities now became our biggest obstacles. I started fantasizing about impossible scenarios. What if I moved to Miami too? I could open my digital business from there. That's true. But how would I explain to my children that we were moving to the other side of the country? How would I leave my father, who was still recovering from surgery? And more importantly, how would I live in a city where Nathan was married to another woman? Would I be the other woman, the mistress he would visit in secret? All these questions kept me awake, made me question whether I was being realistic or just a desperate woman trying to cling to an impossible passion. The line between true love and fantasy was becoming increasingly blurred. The conversations with Nathan started getting tense, loaded with frustrations neither of us knew how to resolve. Why does life have to be so complicated? I asked during our nightly calls. Why can't we just be together and that's it? He sighed on the other end of the line. Because we're adults with responsibilities, Rebecca. Because our choices affect other people. Because true love sometimes means making painful sacrifices. I hated when he got philosophical like that, because I knew he was right, but my heart refused to accept logic. I wanted to be selfish. I wanted him to choose our happiness above everything else. The first fight happened on a Thursday night. Nathan had just confirmed he would accept the transfer, and I couldn't hide my revolt. So that's it. 3 months of conversation, 3 perfect days in San Francisco, and you're just going to leave as if nothing happened. My voice was loaded with hurt and accusation. Rebecca, it's not that simple. And you know it, he replied, and I could feel his frustration too. Do you think it's easy for me? Do you think I'm not suffering as much as you? But I can't simply abandon my family, my career, my entire life for a relationship that started 3 months ago. The words simply hurt me deeply. Our connection was many things, but simple, it definitely wasn't. We hung up the phone fighting for the first time. I spent the entire night replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I was being unfair. Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe I was being dramatic, too romantic, expecting him to change his entire life for me. But when I woke up the next morning and saw a message from him on LinkedIn, "Sorry about yesterday. Can we talk?" I realized he was suffering as much as I was. The difference was, he had chosen to be practical, while I still fed irrational hopes. Love does that to us, right? Makes us believe we can overcome any obstacle, even when reality screams the opposite. We tried to maintain contact in the following weeks, but it wasn't the same anymore. The conversations became more spaced out, more cautious, loaded with a sadness neither of us wanted to admit. Nathan started preparations for the move, looked for a house in Miami, organized the transfer of belongings, started saying goodbye to colleagues in Colorado. Each update he gave me was like a stab in the heart. I found a beautiful house in Coral Gables. Carmen is thrilled. My father improved a lot knowing I'm coming back. The hospital in Miami has incredible infrastructure. I tried to be an understanding friend, but inside, I was falling apart. The last phone call happened 3 days before his move. It was short, formal, full of unspoken words. "Rebecca, I want you to know that these months were the best of my life in a long time. You reminded me of who I am when I'm not just being the responsible doctor, the perfect husband, the obedient son. You saw me as Nathan, simply Nathan." I was crying silently on the other end of the line. "And you reminded me that I can still be truly loved," I replied with a choked voice. "That I can still be desired, admired, seen. Thank you for that, Nathan. Thank you for showing me I wasn't dead inside, just asleep." When we hung up, we both knew it was a real goodbye. There was no promise of, "Let's keep in touch," or "Maybe someday." It was the end of a story that had barely begun, but that had changed both of us forever. That night, lying in my bed in Riverside, looking at the ceiling in the dark, I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. I cried for the loss of the love that could have been, for returning to the cold reality of my dead marriage, for the emptiness Nathan would leave in my life. But I also cried with gratitude, because he had proven to me that I was still capable of feeling something so intense and true. And deep down, a part of me knew our story hadn't ended completely. That sometimes destiny has strange ways of reuniting people who are made for each other. Have you ever done something so desperate for love that you can't even believe you were capable of it? That's exactly how I feel, telling this part of the story. A month and a half had passed since Nathan moved to Miami. A month and a half of total silence, of trying to convince myself it had just been a phase, a moment of passing madness. But the truth was, I was dying inside. I woke up every day hoping for a message from him that never came. I checked LinkedIn obsessively, saw that he was online, posting about his new life in Miami, smiling in photos from the new hospital. Meanwhile, I was in Riverside, pretending everything was fine, but feeling like a part of my soul had been ripped out by force. The idea came almost accidentally. I was late. Not much, just about 5 days, but enough to make me think. Obviously, the probability of actually being pregnant was minimal. After all, James and I barely touched each other for years, and with Nathan, we had taken all precautions. But those 5 days of delay messed with my head in a strange way. I started fantasizing. What if I were pregnant with Nathan's baby? What if this were a sign from the universe? It was a dangerous fantasy, but it gave me a spark of hope amid the emptiness I was living. If I were pregnant, he would have to come back. He would have to choose between me and his life in Miami. When my period came on the 6th day, I felt such a deep disappointment that it scared me. For a few hours, I had fed the irrational hope of carrying the child of the man I loved. Reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. I wasn't pregnant. Nathan continued in Miami with his wife, and I continued in Riverside, trying to pretend my life made sense. It was in this moment of total despair that a terrible idea began to germinate in my mind. What if I told him I'm pregnant? Just to make him come back, just so we'd have a chance to talk, to be together again. It was madness, I knew, but love sometimes makes us consider madness. At first, I completely rejected the idea. Rebecca, you can't lie about something like this. It's cruel. It's manipulative. But as the days passed and his silence continued, the temptation grew. I started to rationalize. It's just to make him talk to me again. Later, I'll invent an excuse. Say it was a false alarm, that I confused the symptoms. It seemed simple in my desperate head. A few weeks of pregnancy, enough time to win him back, to make him realize he loved me enough to leave everything. Then, I would discover it was a mistake. It was a terrible plan, but my broken heart couldn't see that. The first step was sending a simple message. Nathan, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. It's about us. I waited 3 days for him to respond. 3 hellish days, checking my phone every 5 minutes. When the response finally came, Rebecca, I don't know if it's a good idea for us to talk. I'm trying to rebuild my life here. I felt it was now or never. Nathan, I'm pregnant. Send. 4 words that would change everything, that would create a lie I didn't know how to get back from. 4 words that would transform our beautiful love story into something dark and manipulative. His reaction was exactly what I expected and feared. At the same time, the phone rang in less than 5 minutes. Rebecca, is it true? How? When? His voice was loaded with shock, panic, but also hope. I found out yesterday. I lied, feeling my stomach churn. I took 3 tests, all positive. Nathan, I don't know what to do. The silence on the other end lasted an eternity. When he finally spoke, I could hear the conflict in every word. My God, Rebecca, this changes everything. I need to think. How are we going to do this? My situation here is complicated, you know. There was a part of his voice that sounded relieved, as if that pregnancy were the excuse he needed to come back to me. In the following weeks, I built an elaborate performance. I researched pregnancy symptoms on the internet, complained about morning sickness during our conversations, talked about changes in my body. Nathan was torn between panic and happiness. Part of me is terrified of the consequences of this, but another part, Rebecca, I've always dreamed of having a child with someone I truly love. Those words should have made me happy, but they only increased my guilt. I was manipulating his purest feelings, using his love against himself. But at that moment, my desperation was greater than my conscience. The farce got complicated when Nathan, being a doctor, started asking technical questions. Have you had an ultrasound yet? You need to start prenatal care immediately. At 42, it's considered a high-risk pregnancy. I invented excuses. I was waiting to complete 8 weeks. I wanted to be sure before doing exams, but I knew I would soon need more concrete evidence. That's when I made the mistake that would destroy everything. I decided to falsify medical exams. I downloaded ultrasound images from the internet, edited pregnancy test photos, created an entire fake documentation. It was like I was in a movie, living a character I didn't recognize. But the worst part, for a few weeks, that lie gave me the happiness I so desperately wanted. Nathan was back in my life, worried about me, planning our future together. The point of no return came when Nathan said he was going to request a transfer back to California. Rebecca, I can't let you go through this alone. I can't abandon my child. At that moment, seeing the absolute sincerity in his eyes through the video call, I realized the dimension of what I had done. I wasn't just lying about a pregnancy. I was destroying the life of a good man, forcing him to make decisions that would affect his entire family, his entire career. But I was so deep in that lie that I didn't know how to go back anymore. How to explain that I had invented a baby to win him back. How to admit that I had manipulated him in the cruelest way possible. The lie had grown so much. It had a life of its own, and I was trapped inside it, sinking deeper and deeper. Do you know that feeling of being in such a big lie that you hope to be discovered just to end the agony? That's exactly what I was feeling when I sent Nathan the morphological ultrasound I had downloaded from the internet. 2.5 weeks had passed since I started this whole farce, and with each passing day, the lie became heavier to carry. Nathan was making concrete plans, requesting transfer from the hospital, looking for an apartment in California, even considering telling his wife about our situation. Rebecca, love, I need to be honest with Carmen. She deserves to know, and I need to assume my responsibilities with you and our baby. The word responsibilities cut me like a knife. He was willing to destroy his family for a child that didn't even exist. The problem is that Nathan wasn't just any man. He was a doctor. And doctors ask questions. Question. Analyze. When I sent the ultrasound image, he immediately wanted to know details. Which hospital did you do this at? Who was the doctor? Can I talk to him about your follow-up? I started inventing increasingly elaborate excuses. The doctor was on vacation. The hospital system was down. I had lost the papers with the contacts. Each lie led to another lie, and I was building a pyramid of falsehoods that was about to collapse. Nathan, why so much worry? Everything is fine with me and the baby, I said, trying to divert focus from the technical questions he asked. But something in his voice started to change. It was subtle at first, just a different hesitation, a longer pause before responding. Rebecca, send me that ultrasound image again. I want to show it to a specialist colleague in obstetrics here at the hospital. My heart froze. Show it to a specialist. Nathan, don't you trust me? I tried to reverse the situation, putting him on the defensive. Of course I trust you, love. It's just that some things in the exam seemed different to me. Maybe it's just my impression. It wasn't an impression. Nathan had suspected something, and my world was about to collapse. That same night, I created another layer in the lie. I said I was having bleeding, that the doctor had given me a scary diagnosis. Ectopic pregnancy. Nathan, I'm very scared. The doctor said it could be dangerous for me. It was cruel to use his fear of losing me to sustain my farce, but I was desperate. I sent another ultrasound image I found in a specific search about tubal pregnancy. Nathan went into total panic. Rebecca, ectopic pregnancy is a medical emergency. You need to be in the hospital now. I'm taking the first flight to California. It was exactly what I wanted, to have him back, but not under the circumstances of a fake medical emergency. That's when I made the fatal mistake. Nathan, desperate to help, started researching the best treatment for ectopic pregnancy. And during this research, he decided to analyze the images I had sent. Rebecca, I need to better understand your case. Can I enlarge the exam images you sent me? Of course, I said yes, not imagining what he was about to discover. Nathan didn't just enlarge the images. He did a reverse Google search. In a matter of seconds, he discovered that My Ultrasound was available on at least 5 different pregnancy websites, including with other patients' names. The house of cards had collapsed. The silence on the other end of the line lasted an eternity when he made the discovery. I knew something was wrong by the way his breathing changed. Rebecca. His voice was controlled, but I could feel the tension. I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be totally honest with me. My heart stopped. Explain to me how the image of your ultrasound has been on the internet for over 2 years, with the name of a patient called Maria Santos. Done. It was the end. There was no way to invent a plausible explanation for that. I had been caught in the cruelest lie someone can tell to the person they love. Nathan, I can explain, was all I could say, with my voice completely choked. Explain what, Rebecca? How you managed to get an ultrasound of a pregnancy that never existed? how you managed to invent our child." The pain in his voice was palpable. It wasn't just disappointment. It was total devastation. "Did you lie about being pregnant? Did you invent our son?" Each word was like a stab in my heart, because I knew I had destroyed the trust of the only man who really loved me. "Nathan, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" he shouted, and it was the first time I heard him raise his voice. "That you're capable of lying about something as sacred as a pregnancy to manipulate me." From there, everything crumbled quickly. Nathan demanded that I admit the complete truth. Through tears and sobs, I told everything. How I invented the pregnancy because I couldn't live without him. How each exam was fake. How I had planned to confess a spontaneous abortion after some time together. "Rebecca, do you have any idea what you did? I was about to leave my wife, my career, my entire family for a lie." The pain in his voice destroyed me more than any scream. "I was willing to take responsibility for being a father because I love you, and you turned that into a cruel farce." The word farce echoed in my heart like a final sentence. When he hung up the phone that night, I knew I had lost Nathan forever. Not just the relationship, but the purest essence of what we had built. Trust, honesty, mutual respect. I had transformed our love into something dirty, manipulative, unrecognizable. Lying on my bedroom floor, crying like I had never cried in my life, I realized I had committed the gravest mistake someone can make for love. I had betrayed the very essence of the person I loved. Nathan was an upright, honest, responsible man, and I had used exactly those qualities against him. 3 days ago, he was willing to abandon everything to be with me. Now he probably never wanted to hear my name again. And the worst part? I deserved every gram of the pain I was feeling. 3 days of absolute silence. After Nathan discovered my lie. 3 days where every minute seemed like an eternity. Where I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for a message that never came. I knew he was processing the betrayal, trying to understand how the woman for whom he was willing to abandon everything had been capable of such a cruel lie. During those 3 days, I couldn't eat properly, work properly, or even pretend I was okay for my children. Kevin even asked, "Mom, are you sick? You look very pale." How to explain to my son that I was dying of remorse for having destroyed the only true love I had found in life. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone rang. It was Nathan. My heart raced in a way that physically hurt. I answered on the first ring, desperate to hear his voice, even knowing he would probably tear me apart completely. "Rebecca." His voice was cold, controlled, completely different from the passionate Nathan I knew. "Nathan, thank you for calling. No," he interrupted me. "Don't say anything. You had your chance to explain, to be honest, and you chose to lie. Now it's my turn to talk." His tone froze me. It was the tone of someone who had made a definitive, irreversible decision. I spent 3 days trying to understand how someone I loved so much was capable of deceiving me in such a calculated way. He continued, and each word was like a razor blade to my soul. "It wasn't an impulse, Rebecca. You planned this. You downloaded images from the internet, edited photos, created an elaborate farce, knowing exactly what you were doing to me." I tried to interrupt. "Nathan, please." "No," he shouted, losing his composure for the first time. "You made me believe we were going to have a child together. You made me hate my wife for not giving me that joy. You almost destroyed my family over a lie." The pain and anger in his voice destroyed me. "You know what hurts me most?" he continued, now with his voice choked. "It's that I was really happy. For the first time in years, I was genuinely happy, thinking about being the father of our baby. I was planning how we would be a family, how I would raise a child with the woman I love, and it was all a lie." I started crying desperately, unable to form words. "Nathan, forgive me, please. I know I was wrong. I know I was terrible, but..." "Forgive?" He cut me off. "Rebecca, You have no idea what you did. I almost resigned from the hospital here. I almost told Carmen about us. I almost destroyed my entire life based on your lie. Then he gave me the last chance to be honest. I'm going to ask you a question, and for the first time in your life, I want you to tell me the absolute truth. Why did you do this? Why did you invent a pregnancy? I took a deep breath, knowing it was my last opportunity to safeguard at least a fragment of what we had. Because I love you so much, I couldn't accept losing you. Because when you moved to Miami, I felt like a part of me had died. Because I'm a desperate 42-year-old woman who would do anything to get back the only man who made me feel alive again. The raw, painful, pathetic truth. Love? He laughed bitterly. This isn't love, Rebecca. Love is respect. It's honesty. It's accepting the choices of the person you love, even when they hurt you. You don't love me. You want me. And when you couldn't have me, you decided to manipulate me in the cruelest way possible. His words hit me like a slap in the face, because deep down, I knew he was right. What I had done wasn't love. It was obsession, selfishness, desperation. Nathan, please, give me a chance to fix this. Fix? He interrupted. How are you going to fix the trust you broke? How are you going to fix the fact that you made me believe I would be a father? And then came the final blow. Rebecca, you asked for money for a medical procedure. $2,000 to treat a pregnancy that never existed. This isn't just lying. It's extortion. My blood froze. I had completely forgotten about the money part. So lost was I in trying to sustain the farce. Nathan, I'll return the money. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. Weren't thinking straight. He laughed again, but it was a laugh without humor. Rebecca, you planned this for weeks. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of cruel and calculated choices. The silence that followed was deafening. I knew I was losing him forever, but I didn't know what else to say. Nathan, I whispered, in a last desperate attempt. I know I made a grave mistake. I know I broke your trust in an unforgivable way. But what we felt for each other was real. The love was real. Please don't throw everything away because of my terrible mistake. He was silent for a few seconds that seemed like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, but definitive. It was real, Rebecca. And maybe that's what hurts me most. You took something pure and true and turned it into something dirty and manipulative. You didn't just lie to me. You profaned what we had. And then, the words I knew were coming, but that still destroyed me. I can't talk to you anymore. I'm going to block you from all networks. Change my number. Do whatever is necessary to move on. Please don't try to contact me in other ways. Let me live my life in peace. When the line went dead, I knew I had lost Nathan forever. Not just the man I loved, but also my own respect, my integrity, any chance of looking back without feeling shame for what I had done. Sitting on the kitchen floor, holding a dead phone, I realized I had destroyed the most precious thing I ever had in life with my own hands. And the worst part, there was no one to blame but myself. Nathan was right to block me, to hate me, to want to forget me completely. I had transformed our beautiful love story into a nightmare he would probably try to forget for the rest of his life. Have you ever tried to talk to someone who completely blocked you? It's one of the most desperate feelings that exist. When Nathan blocked me from all social networks and changed his number, I felt like I had lost not only the man I loved, but any chance of redemption. The first days were the worst. I tried to send messages on LinkedIn and received that cruel notification. This message could not be delivered. I tried calling the old number and heard only, "The number you dialed does not exist." It was like Nathan had simply disappeared from the face of the earth, taking with him any possibility of me fixing the damage I had done. But obsession wouldn't let me give up. I needed to talk to him, explain, truly ask for forgiveness. The first attempt was through the email of the hospital where he worked in Miami. I got the address from the institutional website and wrote a long detailed letter asking forgiveness for everything I had done. Nathan, I know you blocked me and have every right to hate me, but I need you to know that I deeply regret every lie I told. You were the most precious thing in my life, and I destroyed everything with my own hands. I never received a response. I tried 2 more times, with different emails, different approaches, total silence. He had probably instructed the secretary to delete any message that came from my name. With each frustrated attempt, my anguish only increased. 2 weeks later, I started using different numbers. I took Lily's phone, my 9-year-old daughter, and sent a message to his WhatsApp, which maybe was still the old number on another app. Nathan, it's Rebecca. Please just read this. You don't need to respond, just read. Message not delivered. I tried with the house landline, leaving messages on an answering machine that might be his. Nothing. I asked a friend from my digital entrepreneurs group to send a message pretending to be a patient interested in his medical services, just to confirm he was okay. She agreed, but we soon discovered he had changed everything. It was like the Nathan I knew had simply ceased to exist. Desperation led me to do things I now recognize as virtual stalking. I created fake profiles on Instagram, Facebook, trying to find him, trying to see how he was. I managed to find his wife Carmen's profile and spent hours analyzing every photo, every story, looking for signs that he had told her about us. The photos showed an apparently happy couple, romantic dinners in Miami, beach walks, smiles that seemed genuine. It was torturous to see that he was moving on, rebuilding his life, while I was completely destroyed. Why can he be happy after everything we lived? I asked myself, as if he didn't have the right to overcome my betrayal. 3 months after the blocking, the obsession reached concerning levels. I woke up at dawn, researching ways to contact him. I considered traveling to Miami, showing up at his hospital, forcing a face-to-face conversation. My work started being affected. My children noticed I was different. Mom, you've been very sad, Kevin commented one day. Did something happen? How to explain to my teenage son that I was obsessed with a man who hated me for good reasons? How to admit that I had become a pathetic version of myself, chasing someone who clearly didn't want to know about me anymore? That's when I started using other people as intermediaries. I convinced a fellow nutritionist who had worked at the same hospital as Nathan in California to try to contact him. Just say it's about a complex clinical case, I asked. She tried, but soon discovered he didn't respond to any contact coming from people who could have connection to me. Nathan was smarter than I imagined. I tried through a cousin who lived in Miami, asking her to go to the hospital, pretending to be a patient. Rebecca, this has already become persecution, she told me, refusing. You need professional help, not a man who clearly doesn't want to talk to you. 6 months had passed when the last attempt happened. I was in deep depression, barely able to work, when one of the girls from my digital marketing group offered to help me. Stephanie was younger, didn't fully understand the situation, but felt sorry for my state. Rebecca, let me try to contact him. Maybe if it comes from someone totally outside the story. She sent a simple message. Dr. Nathan, my name is Stephanie. I'm friends with Rebecca Williams. She asked me to talk to you because she's very sorry for what happened. I don't know the details, but I can see she's suffering a lot. Every human being deserves a second chance, right? Could you at least listen to what she has to say? The response came 3 days later, not to Stephanie, but to me, through an email that arrived from an account I didn't know. It was him. Rebecca, a person connected to you, contacted me asking for a second chance for you. I need you to understand something. There is no second chance for betrayal. The way you betrayed me. You didn't lie about small things. You invented a pregnancy, made me believe we would be parents together, almost destroyed my marriage for your fantasy. I earnestly ask you to stop trying to contact me through other people. I don't want to know how you are. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your presence in my life in any way. Please, leave me alone. If you contact me again, by any means, I will take legal action. This is my last communication with you. When I read that message, I finally understood I had lost Nathan forever. Not just the relationship, but any possibility of at least having his forgiveness. He didn't just hate me. He completely despised me. And after 6 months of desperate and pathetic attempts, I realized he was right. I had crossed all lines of respect, decency, mental sanity. It was time to stop. It was time to accept that some things in life can't be fixed, no matter how much we want to. It was time to try to rebuild my own life, even knowing that a part of me would always carry the scar of the biggest mistake I ever made. But deep down, a whispering voice still wondered, what if one day he changes his mind? What if time heals these wounds? What if destiny gives us a true second chance? Some obsessions never die completely. They just sleep, waiting for the right moment to awaken again. I know many of you must be thinking, I'm a terrible person, that I lied unforgivably, but I was also a woman desperate for love, who discovered late what it was like to feel true passion. The question that won't be silenced is, how far would you go for love? Would you be capable of lying about a pregnancy to not lose the person you love? Tell me in the comments, have you ever done something terrible for love? Have you ever lied to win or keep someone?